Well, I think a lot of artists will say, oh, I'm not inspired, or oh, I haven't been inspired, and I don't really understand that because I don't create an idea. I start and then I get inspired as I go, and I always get inspired as I go. So I'm never inspired, but kind of also always inspired at the same time. I think inspiration should be created, not like a lightning bolt that enters your body. But that's also not completely true because I do love having ideas and they are a jumping off point. I think my work won't look good unless I at least have a small idea to start with. I've always liked to do art, but I started taking it really seriously in high school when I was 17. When I was taking this astronomy class, and I was really inspired by the simulation theory. And when I think simulation, I think two-dimensional. So I thought, okay, what if all the planets were flat? Not something that I actually believe, but, if we were a simulation, I was kind of drawing that connection, right? So I I painted this on this long wooden panel, the 8 planets, as if they were flat. So for example, Mars has the craters, right? So I drew the craters as like an L shape. I can't remember the logic of that, but it was definitely some scientific influence, and it was very mathematical, very precise, lots of measuring involved. But yeah, no, I've evolved a lot since then. I don't, measure or do anything math related. It's a lot more expressionist. And I think I always took art classes in school. Middle school, elementary school, I think most kids have that artistic instinct. But I never felt like I had to do it until high school. My aunt is an art teacher and she does pottery as well. And then my mom has always been very creative. She's not an artist, but she was an editor and a writer. She wrote a book. And, she kind of hops from field to field in her career. So she likes to switch things up and go with what she is inclined to do at any given moment. So I think that's a very creative mindset to have. But I wouldn't say it's a family full of visual artists. I went to Hampshire, just a liberal arts. I didn't go to an art school ever, and I only took one painting class in college. I was an art major, but I did sculpture and printmaking, and I wanted to explore every possible, art field. So I ended up neglecting painting. And I think I did a lot of it independently, and I didn't really need a lot of courses on it to be motivated to create. So I did sculpture. I didn't really like it. I think I just didn't really know how to get into the process of sculpture. Less expressive, less go with the flow, more structured, like literally. And I realized that I like creating a world that feels 3D or that evokes being in a 3D space on like a 2D plane, and that was sufficient. I didn't need to get more literal about it and make something 3D. Actually, there are a couple sculptures I've made that I really enjoyed. But again, I like the flat surface and pouring something into that as opposed to building the 3D space. Printmaking, that was also I felt sort of detached process-wise, because you can't really get messy with it. And it goes through a press, and I like the expression, the immediacy of the gesture onto the canvas, as opposed to rolling ink onto something and then printing it on something else. I think it's just a generalized liberal arts degree that everyone gets, but my focus was in studio art. I really like going to work actually, which is very unrelated to my art making, and I get to solve problems for people and with people, and it's just a very traditional office environment. And then I like coming home and being more artistic and utilizing my emotions instead of hiding them. The way I approach art isn't like I'm gonna do these pieces about this or they're gonna relate in this way. I understand what I'm thinking about after I've already made the work. So I curate it and explain it after everything's already done. And I get to see, like, I understand what I was thinking about afterwards. Because it's a very different mindset that I'm in while I'm making art versus thinking about it or looking at it with a critical eye. Because, like, I always go back to things, you know, like I may take a break for a while and veer off, but I usually come back to the same few things, and sometimes it takes a few years to do that, you know. I always try to make something that evokes something or makes sense or tells a story. I think an image paired with how you would feel standing in front of the actual realistic version of that image. For example, like a landscape, for example. The point of abstracting it is to evoke not what it looks like, but how it feels when you're there. You know, I always like to create new work before something and challenge myself to do as much as I can in, you know, a small period of time. I do find creating a cohesive body of work to be very difficult because I like to take inspiration from many different things and jump from idea to idea. And then my studio always looks different and I'm always using different supplies. So it's kind of hard to create something that looks the same through multiple pieces of work. But like I said, it can be easier to do that throughout the years. You know, I kind of go back to certain things. So I'm like, wow, I have 5 pieces that look very similar from 5 different years, and a lot of pieces that look different from those same years. I like to start with a background. I mean, lately my backgrounds have been the AI generated images, but I always like to start with a background and then I leave it probably for a while, and then go back in. It's like I don't even know how to talk about how I work. Like, I just kind of do it. And I like to use a lot of red, black, and white, I'm realizing. Those are mostly the colors that I use. And then I really like doing the AI generated pieces as well. But in terms of my own style, there are certain techniques that I use all the time. You know, like the crackling effect and then just the abstract expressionism sort of thing. So I think when I'm working more, that's when things start to look very similar, but the key is to just work a lot. I guess I have a lot of philosophies about it and principles that I like to follow. I think it's very important to be in the moment and for everything to be genuine and not to make something because you think it'll look good. Well, I'm always inspired. I can always make art at any time because, like I said, even if I don't have an idea, I'll get the ideas as I'm going. I know I definitely do this a lot. It's like I'll think of something and then I'll do it. But I feel a lot better when I do something first and then think about it afterwards. Or, you know, where I'm able to put something out in the real world and then process it afterwards as opposed to the opposite. I think it's a lot more exciting that way. I think a lot about, again, process and the best way to do things and go about things, not necessarily in art, but in life and just everyday tasks. You know what I mean? Like how to optimize the brain and the body as a human being. And I think art has taught me a lot about that. And I think I've become a lot better at other things in my life because of the artistic process, and vice versa. Doing a lot of non-art related things teaches me a lot about the process in art. It's just like a mental exercise it's like a study on being a human. I have a lot of supplies that I've gotten for free, just people getting rid of old, house paint and house materials like wood finish and asphalt, roof cement. So I like being kind of industrial with the work and having it have that sort of rugged quality to it rather than fine art. Or that's not typical for fine art, but then I like to beautify it, I guess. I made the flowers out of the roof cement. So I like making things that are normally beautiful, ugly, and then things that are normally ugly, beautiful. I would say multimedia. I like to incorporate at least one other material besides paint when I'm working. I've been really into wax lately. That's an example of some discipline and pain, actually. I made that piece as part of the exercise to be in my studio for 10 minutes at a time, at least every day. And so it was like very slow process of dripping the wax, and then I would put my finger on it while it was still kind of wet, and sometimes I wouldn't wait long enough, so it would really hurt. Yeah, I mean, I love materials and like how they feel and how they go onto the canvas, how they blend together. It's really just an exploration of different materials. Yeah, so I go through phases. So I'm always using paint and I'm sometimes using other materials, and those materials change a lot, but paint is very consistent in my work. I use acrylic paint and glue. Yeah, and I don't have to wait for it to dry for like 2 weeks. And I mean, oil looks way better, but acrylic, and I can get messier with it. Get it on my floor, on my walls, or, on my clothes, and not have to worry about toxicity. Because I don't want to have to like worry or think about something that'll hold me back when I'm working. I definitely take inspiration from other artists, but the way I use it isn't literal. Like, I'm not like, oh, I'm copying this piece. It's more like I sort of take it and then I process it in my own way using similar techniques, even if the materials aren't similar. Sometimes I do have materials that are gifted to me, which I almost prefer because I think too hard about what I should buy, so it's nice to just have it and be as creative with it as possible. Art is what you can't put into words, so backtracking and trying to fit it into that was always hard for me. Not to say that I don't think it's possible, and artists do it very, very well. I think it just takes practice. I think it's an exercise, a mental exercise in achieving a certain process in a way that's most true to the self. It's interesting because when I first discover a technique, it looks the best when it's first discovered. And when I try to recreate it, it's just sort of like a whisper of it and is less impressive looking to me. So I think newness is really important in art. When something is first discovered and it's fresh, I think it looks the best. That being said, I think my first crackle piece looks the best, and I've done it a lot after that, but it's, never been quite the same because I know what I'm doing, so it becomes mechanical or robotic and less, discovery oriented. And I guess it's about creating something new for the technique to do each time. Or I guess new circumstances for the technique to exist in. I just don't think the work ever looks as good when you know where it's going. It's very stressful. Very stressful. Like, um,
Tell me what's
it's like a headache, you know?
Start in the beginning with that.
Yeah.
The process of creating these.
Right, the process of creating the mathematical pieces and solving these very like meticulous problems is a bit of a headache, but it felt necessary at the time, and I think it was necessary at the time, because now I can make much bigger work and looser work. You know, I started off really sort of tight, and now my work has gotten just looser and less uptight.
So do you have like a regular weekly routine? I mean, are you one of those discipline artists where you come up here every Sunday at 6 o'clock and paint for 3 hours?
So I tried that for a bit. Like, I was like, okay, since I'm keeping my 9 to 5 and have not much time for art, I want to at least spend 10 minutes in the studio after work. And that was great, actually. And then, you know, I stopped doing that just because I'm not a consistent person. But the consistency didn't make my art worse. So it's hard to say. I don't know if the quality of the work would decline if I was disciplined about it for an extended period of time. But I think painting is inherently, not inherently, but the abstract painting is inherently inconsistent and kind of emotions-based. So I think if you're too disciplined and robotic about it, it may not express as much as you want it to, or it should. But maybe not. I don't know. I haven't tried it. I think, it was honestly a great experience being consistent, but I don't know how long that would last. And the work to still look as good as it does, or maybe it would be better. I don't know. I really believe in balance. I think discipline is very good, and I think spontaneity is very good. And I think as many qualities that you can incorporate, the better. I think well-roundedness always makes for a good piece of art. So if it can be disciplined and spontaneous and light and dark and all the things, it'll probably be better. Oh, definitely. Like, if I try to do something that I already thought of, it just never looks as good as it is in my head. And I think ideas are very important as a basis, but not as an end point. So I think that's what's so fun about art for me, is that the surprise of it. I'm like, wow, real life is way more interesting than my thoughts, which I think is cool, you know? So it's very fun being able to surprise yourself. I would say don't be afraid to mess up.
So that's how artists should start? Just start?
Yeah. And, you know, don't let the idea stop in your mind. It should be more of a starting point to develop your work, and you should discover on canvas or paper or whatever materials you're using, rather than the discovery starting and ending as an idea.
So let the ideas kind of flow out of you as you're creating and learning?
Right. It should be very simultaneous, the thoughts with the real life creation. Just through process and exploration, and I always get inspiration from my own work. A lot of pieces end up with one aspect where I'm like, wow, that's really great. So I take that and kind of enlarge it into the next piece. Even when I'm not inspired, and I don't really believe in inspiration, but even when I don't feel like painting, or it's not an urge, it's always in the back of my mind. It's part of my identity, even if I'm not particularly passionate about it in a given time period. No, I'm not being that adventurous. I think it would be more adventurous if I didn't paint on the AI prints, but still not that adventurous either way, because artists are doing that and selling pieces that are AI generated and not touched by their own hands for a while now. Yeah, I guess like I said before, I want the paintings to evoke something, a reaction. I think any reaction is good. good or bad. I think it's all good. Not like shocked. I don't think my work is shocking, but I want to make stuff that's new, and I think new things in art especially should be not necessarily pleasant. And I want to make art that looks good, but also that is weird. I mean, it really depends who you are as an individual, right? Like, what you consider weird. But for the average person, I would say AI-generated, abstracted, like messed up human limbs are weird. At first, I wanted to do the very human abstraction AI imagery paintings. I thought it was just going to be that. But now, there's a lot of similarities in the work to some of my old pieces, particularly the ones without the human elements. So I think I might end up doing that, sort of combining, like these hive pieces with other crackle effect ones. Yeah, so it could go either way. It could be more human or more abstract. I haven't decided yet. I spent a lot of time on the internet, so I saw it everywhere. And I'm always trying to do less. Or I really like Andy Warhol's line. Like, he once said, art is what you can get away with. And I like that a lot. And I like to use that in my own work. And I think AI kind of falls into that. I'm like, oh, what if I could sell something that's completely AI generated that I don't even touch, like with a paintbrush? I like controversy, and I think since AI is new, it's still controversial. And I like exploring new technology and developments and innovation in my work. So I do a text prompt for the AI imagery, and then if I like it, I'll save it, get it printed on canvas, and then once the canvases are here, I'll let the mood of the image sort of fill me with creativity, and then I'll start painting. I'm inspired by the AI image, which creates the rest of the painting. The vision when I'm generating the AI is, I don't have a vision for the painting part of it. I just have the vision for the AI part when I'm generating it. And the image, what's kind of tricky is the images themselves are so cool and come out so great that I don't really want to paint on them. But, I'm sort of like, oh, I guess I should, to put more of a personalized touch. And I do end up liking them better when I put paint on them. But the vision comes when they're like in front of me on the canvases. I really like using Bella Hadid as my model. And I really like not only abstracting, but uglifying something beautiful. Like, I like beauty with something monstrous or intense that makes it not necessarily ugly, but scary. I've never been able to paint or draw realism, so I like that I can generate that very easily. And I do like abstraction, so I do like realistic imagery and human imagery, but abstracted. So it's a way to do that and have very powerful and intense images. Yeah, I just like exploring innovation and controversy because I think a lot of great work and great styles and techniques started off as controversial. It's just interesting because I don't know if, like, how much I care about a lot of people seeing my art. Because it's so rewarding just making it, that for me to expose it to the world, it would be, I don't know, like, for money. Like, because I don't know, because I feel so validated and just like making it in itself, and it is so rewarding, I don't really need people to think it's good. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely taking it really seriously. Definitely felt really good and significant because I've never had a solo show before. Especially because it's in a Masonic building, so it's very Illuminati. That's just the way I like to think about stuff, where I'm like, oh my God, I'm trying to think of the significant parts of like the solo show, and like, yeah, like I'm already including it as part of like my history, I guess, like first solo show, like in a Masonic building, you know what I mean? So yeah, I am pretty spiritual. I mean, I think for the most part, like it'll break the ice on being an artist in the world and, showing that it's in the realm of possibility. So it'll bring the idea of it that I've always had down to earth and make other shows feel more accessible. There's a certain shyness that comes with exposing something that feels so personal. So I'm sure I'll feel a little timid, but I'm usually pretty social. I developed the Greenfield Arts Walk, so I've had experience curating work and putting it in different spaces in town, but this is definitely very different because I'm also making the work. So I'm not only looking at everything together, but also making it and trying to curate and create at the same time, which I think are very different processes. I think it's easy to see something that's already been made and piece it together visually, but to be making it at the same time, I think it's difficult to sort of be involved and then also have the critical eye. So I hope for a really good turnout. I care less and less about selling it now that I have a job, which I think is good because it means the work is more genuine that way and comes from a more genuine place rather than like money. I mean, it's different for everybody. For me, I think it's easier to focus on making something that holds better values when I'm not thinking about the monetary benefit. I think a lot about the best way to do things, right? And I think the best way to do things is personal to the individual. So I think with artistic mastery, for me at least, since it's very process-based, comes with mental mastery. Like if I take my process in the studio and make a great painting and I use that same mindset out in the world, then I'm gonna be successful at whatever I'm doing.